Hello and welcome back to Alchemy with Sheeana Leigh. Today we are going to get raw and real on how to heal heartbreak. This is going to be a bit of a deep dive, a little bit of a personal deep dive as well, as somebody who has been going through extreme heartbreak at the moment. I feel like I'm very well versed in heartbreak as somebody who has had my heart ripped to shreds and broken a lot in my lifetime. I am a Cancerian woman. I am a very watery, emotional babe, and I love with my whole heart and being. So each and every time I allow myself to love so fully and so openly and so much another person and another being and another experience, I obviously allow myself to crack open and be in a lot of pain because when we love so deeply, we hurt so deeply afterwards. And I was talking to a dear friend and a peer the other day, and obviously moving through divorce and heartbreak at this point in time, I was sharing how I was and how I've moved through the process. And she very much stopped me in my tracks and told me, like, you need to talk about this. Like, how have you moved through this so gracefully and so fast? And then she told me that I needed to do a podcast episode about it because a lot of people would love to know how to move through this somatic, visceral experience and what steps and processes I've actually taken to move through it so extremely fast, process it fast, and then the big key here is to not close off. So to not harden and close and disconnect from the heart and become bitter and sour and put up all those walls and shields when relating. We're relational beings. We're going to be relating constantly. But then to allow that heartbreak and that pain to actually transform us, to transmute us, to move through wounding and pain, and then allow us to actually open more and soften. And it is an art. It is an alchemical art form. And I'm going to be sharing my processes and how I move through things and invite you to perhaps, if you're feeling heartbreak at this time or great grief, to actually lean into some of these practices. I'm a really big believer, first and foremost, on feeling your feelings. This is, I believe, one of the key elements for me to actually move through things in my body so fast. I actually completely allow myself to go extremely into the feelings. So much so that the other day I was out and I was deeply sad, deeply felt like my whole heart was being ripped out of my chest cavity. And I felt so sick. I couldn't eat. And I'm walking down the street and I actually threw up in the garden the couple of mouthfuls that I did force myself to eat in the garden, in the street, walking down the street. And I just, kept going. I give myself full permission to go all the way to the sensational experience of my feeling without needing to name it, without needing to shame it or judge it, right? Like I feel the full force of my sensational feelings and experience. As a matter of fact, I sometimes let myself, not sometimes, I mostly let myself collapse into it because I believe that it cracks us open. And before I, say, yeah, go into the extreme extremities of your sensations and feelings, there's a lot of things I've done to be able to hold myself in that experience without collapsing completely and spiraling down, right? Because there is a fine dance there. I have really cultivated deeply embodied safety within myself. I have done this so many times, allowed myself to go to the pits of hell with like my sensations and feelings and emotions, that I know that I can absolutely get down in the muck and in the mud and pull myself back out again. Like I have absolutely no fear of cracking open to that experience. And I have no fear that I'm going to get into that space and not be able to rise again and pick myself back up. Like I can hold myself. I'm safe with myself. I trust and have faith in myself that I will be able to go into that experience and transmute it and move through that passage, because it truly is, our pain points are a passage point. So I wanted to preface that and say that, before you delve into these extreme emotional, cathartic release states and sensational movements somatically in your body, that it's important to know that you are safe and that you have no fear to do it. And if you are unable to do it by yourself, I highly recommend getting space held for you through a somatic practitioner, through community, through friends, through someone you feel safe to share your experience with and be witnessed without spiraling down. Because it's quite easy to spiral down when we are deep in our wounding. And let's be real, when we are moving through extreme heartbreak, all of our deep unconscious woundings come up, of rejection wounding, abandonment wounding, all of these old ancient stories that are not true come up, that you're unlovable, that there's something wrong with you, that you're broken, that you're unworthy. And so it's really important because it's such a tender time. I actually wrote down this very methodically, and I'm going to read some of it to you in a post I did a little while back on, like, okay, these are the steps that I took to move through my heartbreak. And so when we're talking about feeling your feelings and the sensational experience of your body, I do not mean to intellectualize your feelings. Don't intellectualize them in your head. Just really allowing your body to feel it and release it. Because you cannot heal, but you cannot feel. Very cliche for me to say. But these cathartic releases are absolutely necessary. You need to feel the spaciousness within your body and within your being to feel what is underneath all of this, right? And have that awareness. So there's always waves, I will say. There has been waves for me throughout this time, different expressions moment to moment, because grief and heartbreak is non-linear, and the process to move through them is not linear. One moment you will feel elated and extreme joy and relief and on top of the world, and you're feeling free and vivacious. And the next, you will be feeling like you want to curl yourself up like a little earthworm and be held. And that is okay. I strongly suggest to be with what is moment to moment, not trying to change the experience, not trying to numb yourself out, not trying to disassociate from that experience or force yourself to move through that, because it's not per se good. And you need to be feeling amazing and empowering. Fake empowerment and superficially making yourself feel things that you do not feel can really hinder the healing experience with heartbreak. Absolutely. So basically, moving through that, non-judgment, validating all of them, accepting all of these emotions and sensations that are coming up, and yeah, really understanding that the more you repress these emotions, the more you're going to just hurt others around you, right? When we are hurt and when we are in wounding and when we do not face our emotions and our sensations and the wounds within our body and being, we unconsciously spit them out and project them to those around us. And this can be absolutely seen and witnessed in other people who obviously repress their emotions constantly and repress these feelings. They numb out, they move on, without any presence and stopping and spaciousness to move through the ache. and perhaps moving on with other people, they will continue to lash out, be the victim, and persecute those around them because they cannot see or feel what's going on internally. And it's easier to blame somebody else and persecute somebody else than it is to look inside and feel those feelings of pain. So remembering that it is really important when we're looking at wanting to open our heart and keep our heart open and soft. One of the other fantastic things that I love to do in regards to moving through experiences relationally, especially when you're unable to speak to that person. So if you're unable to speak to that person, and you're seeking this closure, I mean, a lot of us do. Sometimes we have this experience where we don't get closure from the relationship, from what happened, and we want to know why or what's wrong or what can we do, and we don't get that feedback consciously from a partner. Then one of my favorite tools of all time, my somatic tools, is called aspecting. Aspecting is incredible because it allows you the space to say the thing, to feel the thing, to express it. And this is so important. A lot of people definitely, talk it out, write letters to their exes or write letters to their colleagues or whoever they're moving through heartbreak with and grief with. If we've had a loved one that passed and we're unable to express anything, they write letters. And this is important. But aspecting is where you grab pillows, and on one pillow you sit down, and on another pillow you close your eyes, you get in your somatic feeling body, and you kind of project the other person sitting on the pillow in front of you. And this is a bit of like Gestalt therapy. And talking out loud is so potent. I talk about this all the time. The vibrations in your throat are important. They are an energetic releasing. So it's important to actually speak these things out. It is pouring rain down here, so I hope it isn't hindering this podcast episode too much. So really good to actually sit down, envision this other person in front of you and expressing everything that you need to say, everything that needs to be witnessed, right? Because we can't expect everybody to hold us in this experience, especially partners who are sort of deep in their burning and not conscious or anything like that. And we want to be seen and heard. I've had two very different experiences recently and lately where I've been able to move through a relationship closure consciously, lovingly expressing, holding each other's hearts. And it's been the most delightful, beautiful experience, as well as painful. And I've also had the experience of completely the opposite, where it is toxic and tumultuous and painful. I'm going to speak more on like toxic relationships and ending toxic relationships and people who are kind of more prone on the narcissism spectrum in a completely different episode. So I'm really trying not to touch too much on that experience, but more on the experience of just you needing to move through your stuff. And sometimes we don't have that conscious, loving partner and closure that we are seeking. So yeah, sitting on the pillow, expressing it out, talking it out. Sometimes you just may need to wail and scream and cry and kick and punch and move, and that just to be seen and witnessed. And then, swapping the pillow. So sitting on the other pillow where your ex may be, or this person, the lost loved one, and embody their energy and kind of like speak back to yourself. It's really, really important that we're doing this as women, because so oftentimes we are not seen and heard and understood, and it is a deep calling within us to be seen and understood and heard. And I feel like moving through this process allows you to have that closure without externally seeking it from the other person that you may not be able to. So this is a very beautiful, like somatic body-based tool. And, it's really good for releasing through the throat. And as we know, as women, I talk about it nearly on every episode, that throat, that beautiful throat region is really connected to our pussies, to our yoni, like to our wombs. So absolutely allowing that energetic flow through is powerful. Another incredible tool that I've used to move through my experiences at the moment is TRE, which is that trauma or tremor release exercises and also somatic releases in my body. If you haven't listened to episode 2 yet, I go deep into with my different crystal all about TRE and sort of that shaking release. It's really powerful when you are in a frozen moment. So, when you're just so deeply heartbroken and depressed and in the depths of despair, and you can't actually do anything. This is really potent for that because it is a soft release exercise and it really invites you to just let your body organically move things out and shift things out without having to force, without having to strive. And it's not a lot of work, right? So this is incredible to do. It's our body's natural way of processing the trauma and stress within the body. So I move through a lot of TRE exercises and somatic release practices in my body. So as you know, like somatically releasing the heart as well, moved into these incredible like breast massage and release exercises, moving the breath to the pain point and pressing and doing like pressure releases and releasing through the voice. This is imperative to basically loosening up these tight spaces. This calcification and this tightening in the body is usually what happens when we're bracing ourselves. And after heartbreak and grief, we usually brace ourselves to protect ourselves, like because we feel like we're under attack, right? And so to soften and to open and loosen, we have to naturally move through a sort of release. Anytime we're in fight, flight, and especially fawn as women, it's liberating to soften all of these parts of the nervous system. So moving into psoas releases is potent as well, especially if you have been in a tumultuous relationship or a tumultuous ending of a relationship and you've had the feeling of being unsafe, so being in survival mode, if you've had to like move house or anything like that, financially worried, psoas releases really potent because that psoas is where we brace ourselves the most. And that is our big muscle from the top half to the bottom half. And it's one of the most important muscles that I work with, especially because it braces and it tightens all our reproductive organs in our hips. And this can create numbness, right? So that's another thing I have really moved into to move through this process as gracefully as possible. Another thing I will scream from the rooftops over and over again is being held in community. Being held in your community, your tribe, your people, your sisters. Being held has been the greatest experiences for me with this. I am so fucking lucky and fortunate that I am surrounded by so many incredible women and beings that have basically offered to support me, to help me vent, to, talking. Women have to talk to release things in their body, that have listened to me over and over again tell a similar story or a same story of heartbreak until it just naturally dissolves. We just need to be heard and listened to. And, being around family and friends and held by women in the community or people in our community is actually fundamental for our grief and for our sadness, for our loss, for our heartbreak. I spoke about this one in the last episode as well, about how we should be grieving out loud and healing out loud, because absolutely we are mostly held in communities. And just because of the way we are in society now, we're so isolated that this kind of can get us spiraling further down when we're isolated and not being held. Being finding the joy in life again, finding your people, doing small things to reinvigorate and spark that joy and pleasure, because sometimes we get stripped of that when we're in deep heartbreak, and it's really important. This brings me on to my next point, that inviting pleasure and sensuality in is a must. A lot of my work, the missing piece and the key to all of my healing and embodiment work was very much pleasure and sensuality, right? Like all of this digging and healing and brutality and ripping out the muck in my body and being, it's like I forgot to play. I forgot to invite pleasure, and pleasure and sensuality is foundational for softening and opening and returning to that innate, feminine expression within yourself. This is your joy. This is your safety. So a lot of time this is overlooked. And I feel like it needs to be embodied more, welcome in more. This is how we return back to our radiance and our magnetism without fully closing off and just shutting ourselves off from the world because we're scared we're going to get hurt. We forget to feel the aliveness, the eros, the pleasure, the divine sensuality that is core to us, that it is innate to our expression and our delicious organic essence. And so, I just love about this. It makes me so juicy. So basically, this is very, very key. So even when you're in the pits of despair, it is important to offer yourself pleasure and sensuality. I went through weeks, there was times straight after my heartbreaks where I was like, I don't want to touch anybody. I don't want to touch myself. I never want to be in a relationship again. And that is perfectly normal. Do not shame yourself or berate yourself for those experiences. Like I said, it's totally a journey. And then there's moments where I just wanted to feel something again. And I went through like peak orgasmic experiences and pleasurable, like sensual experiences. And my God, it just propelled me into feeling like a human woman again. Like I was like, oh, maybe this is what I needed. I just needed to like come back to myself and nourish myself and nurture myself. And yeah, it's really beautiful. So one of the things I love to play in is titration, which is moving in and out of states. So like pendulum swinging between states. It can be a very erotic experience, especially when we're dealing with like grief and pleasure. Right? These two, polarizing, you would think like opposite experiences. It's kind of like it eases that sort of descent of going into the depths of your emotions and circumstances. So I'm going to share very personal experience. When I was moving through my studies quite a few years ago, I was feeling the pits of my grief and despair from abuse as a child. And I was just feeling this overwhelming like grief and contortion in my body. And I actually had the experience of inviting that grief into my pleasure experience. And I remember having, using my jade egg, just being with the grief, like not wanting to move it, having the jade egg there, like self-pleasuring. And I moved through the most incredible pleasurable slash grief experience of my entire life, which actually opened up my entire body and being. It's like I let the grief be there, I let the pleasure be there. I kind of danced between inviting the grief to kind of consume my body, then the pleasure to kind of consume my body, and then both to coexist. And I had a complete like internal laughing orgasm that I've never experienced before in my life from my belly. It's kind of like opened up like my rib cage and my solar plexus. And this joy just washed all the way over me and throughout my body, and sadness and tears. And absolutely, we can invite these experiences into our pleasure experience because they're powerful. They're a powerful, sensational, emotional experience. And yeah, if that sounds like a little bit of edgy, kinky stuff for you to dive into, I invite you to do that too. And I've done that multiple times. So Lots of self-care. Like we already know, so much self-care is needed, so much nourishment is needed, so much uh, deep, pleasurable experiences. So it can just be soft. It can just start slow and soft. It can just be like skin stroking and like warm salt baths for a couple of hours, breast massages, and even all the way up to like orgasms, and peak pleasurable experience, because orgasms are very beneficial for regulating the system, circulating and alchemizing throughout your entire body. Nervous system regulation, pleasure. I'm all about that pleasure. Another number six, I haven't actually been numbering them at all. I'm just giving a lot of information here. Another thing is rest, deep, deep rest, sleep, rest. This is our body's natural way to heal itself, right? Lounge around, be a cat, rest a lot, let your body fatigue guide your way, right? I talk about this all the time, that we can only move as fast as our slowest and most tender pieces. And if you have a piece or parts of you that are really feeling the grief and the magnitude of your abandonment wounding, you're not good enough wounding, you're too much wounding, that's a massive one for us women, then you're not going to be able to power through, or you're going to like push through and end up heartbroken, crumbling, and completely collapsing further down the track. It's like, yes, give yourself time and patience to actually rest when you want to, without criticism and judgment. I also go as far as, you know, I'm a full permission slip to do what you have to do to move through the way you need to move through. A lot of people, a lot of women, dating coaches, relationship coaches, sex coaches, whatever you want to say, they will tell you that there is a right way and there is a wrong way. And I think that that is not true. There is only your way and only your unique way, which you will intuit moment to moment. And you can only do that if you are connected to your body and inhabiting your body fully. I talk about this all the time. I'm so passionate about this. I will not sit here and give you a list and a set of rules and do's and don'ts and have to's. I open you up to an invitational experience of how I do things and empower you to move through it at your own pace, how you like. I'm also not one of those people, I'm not one of those somatic practitioners that tell you that things are toxic and bad and terrible. I'm like a sometimes the poison is the medicine, the very medicine that you need, right? At this point in time, your wounds will be acting up and you may dip into, let's say, toxic or unhealthy structures or actions that you normally wouldn't do. And this is so normal. They could be completely against who you are at your core, completely against who your character is, but let's be real when we look at this and take note that you're possibly moving through like severe inner child wounding, severe wounding of all of these like really deep rooted foundational structures within you that were imprinted through your family dynamic as a child and those pre-developmental years. So it's really important to give yourself grace, right? And if you are laying on the couch watching Netflix for days, the worst thing you can do for yourself is go to war with yourself and berate yourself and criticize and judge yourself. And this is where we get stuck in that spiraling down looping. It's like absolutely be your biggest cheerleader, your biggest acceptor, and be like, okay, like this is what I need to do at this point in time. Allow yourself that deep acceptance for what is without that judgment, because that is truly how we move through things fast. I have done some stupid shit through my breakups, some things that I would never normally do. And it's usually like this little wounded part of me that just feels complete sadness and wants to love and belong and feel good enough or feel cherished. And that's not happening, right? So it's trying to get its needs met. This little darling of mine who has been very traumatized in the past and deeply wounded and affected is just moving through things. And I will never berate myself. I'll be like, okay, because I truly believe that sometimes we need to move through these things to come out the other side, right? If we're sitting there and we're fighting ourselves every step of the way and berating ourselves and telling ourselves we're bad or wrong or this, that, and the other, like that is going to contract us even more, harden us even more, and feel like we have to protect ourselves even more, which what does that do? Makes us close off and shut down. And then it fragments us internally even more. This is how you move through things with openness, with love for yourself. Like you can come out of this so much more connected to these pieces and parts of yourself than you ever thought imaginable. Because when I look at love and relationships, I look at it as, sometimes we are in deep reverence for this other person. And sometimes when that gets disconnected, it really is a calling back into self-love, right? To love ourselves more, to nourish ourselves more, to find these little bits and pieces and aches and wounds within us, to kind of kiss our wounding back into the light of day for it to be transmuted. And if you're not doing that, that is how you again move into cycles of the same sort of relating in the future, right? We have relationship cycles that we kind of can't break out of. And why is that? It's because we don't move into a deep space of actual tenderness and care and softening, seeing these wounded parts of us within us and loving them back to life, right? So this is my firm belief. So another thing I do, of course, I said nourish, fuel your body with what it needs, nourishing foods, cleansing herbs that are rightful, plenty of liquids, detox your body, restore. Recently, when I moved out of a toxic relationship, I actually went through a phase of, not a phase, I actually went through a deep prayer and deep fastening of my energy. So I would call my energy back into my body. I would release these people from my womb. As women, we hold a lot of energetics within our womb. I'll get more into that later. But yeah, I really just like called all my energy, all my power back and asked and prayed out on the earth, like release these people from my being. And honestly, I was like holding onto the earth one day, like praying out loud, setting my intention. And the very next day, I passed a fucking parasite in my body. And I have never, ever passed a parasite. And I seen it. I knew what it was. I was absolutely, completely shocked. And it was the most horrendous thing I'd ever seen in my life. But I took that as me purging this from my being and body. So I think it's really important that we fuel ourselves. And then again, if you move into spaces of just eating potatoes, that's okay too. I do not shame or criticize myself or anything. I move into complete acceptance for all that is. And that's something I love about me. And that's something I love giving the people I work with full permission to do. Like I will never judge you and criticize you for how you move through things, as long as you are not judging and criticizing yourself either, because it is the biggest disruption to who we are in our being. Like it's so awful. Brings me to my next point, nervous system regulation, top tier, vagus nerve stimulation. So this is easy and simple as like humming, as singing, as, moving through like gua sha. I always sort of like press these like lymph nodes and bring them down to actually flush out my system. That's kind of more flushing out toxins than nervous system regulation. But there are so many ways. Just look it up on Google. Nervous system regulation, vagus nerve stimulation. There's so many ways to do it. And yeah, really highly really highly suggest that you do that, especially moving out of a place of fight, fawn, freeze, turbulence. Very, very imperative if you are wanting to feel resourced and resilient in your body and being. That kind of coincides with getting the fuck out in nature, getting out in nature, laying on the earth fully, right? Naked, it would be best. Getting your skin touched and caressed by the sun, by the light. You know, if you're really big into how the light affects our brain chemistry in our body, you will know that getting out in the sun is the best thing that you can do. Laying on the earth, also one of the best things you can do. Hugging a tree, being with the trees, absolutely. Getting out in the ocean, letting the salt water cleanse you. Nothing heals like nature. Nothing heals like being caressed and breathed through and with nature. You can regulate with nature. There is, as somebody who has had extreme child abuse, let me tell you that nature has been the number one thing that has absolutely helped re-heal my body and my system, because we start to feel that connection and that sense of wholeness within us, you know, like trees are so intelligent and they can actually read our bodies and our entire cells. So get out of nature, walk barefoot on the earth. You know, one of the things I love to do is connect my womb with the earth. So I like squat down on the earth and let my womb connect to the earth and my yoni. It's so good for you. Another thing that I have highly done and highly believe that we should all do is create and play. When we move through a breakup, one of the biggest things is our inner child wounding comes up, right? Like all of these key pre-developmental wounds as we were a child, like our family dynamics. So it's really important that you move into creation and play. I am so big on using our hands and creation. Like it helps us get in touch with our inner children. It helps us play. It helps rewire that connection there and let them know that they're safe and that we're there with them. It creates that like inner spark. And yeah, whatever way that is, get messy, go play in the mud, make like, you know, beautiful nature baths, paint, draw, be a silly goose. There is nothing I love more than being an absolute silly goose. Get a new hobby. Go learn to pole dance. Oh, that was something I did. Burlesque dancing. Started that. So create that joy and create that play, like welcome it in. Finding a new hobby when you're moving through heartbreak is important because it fills that void. And I'm not talking about like the relationship void. I'm talking about the habitual texting, the habitual calls. Like you feel a little bit empty when you go from being around someone and talking to someone every single day for hours a day. And then it just goes to nothingness. Like fill that up. Go play. Go and yeah, remember that laughter is medicine for your soul. Like it truly, truly is. Dance, embodied movement, absolutely. And the last and final thing I would love to talk about is one of my favorite things. Mm. It is womb clearing, yoni de-armoring, heart, hip, and pelvic releases. So basically the womb, cervix, heart, throat, the entire belly somatically linked to the inner child, the umbilicus. It is crucial as women to move into a space of actually clearing. We store so many pent-up emotions and tightening in these places and spaces. So any type of releasing work, de-armoring, clearing, softening somatically to restore our body's natural capacity. This brings us back into our harmonious hum, so to speak. So this is how we move through decalcification. This is how we move into softening. So this can be a really tender process, but I really, really am so for clearing out the womb and the body of energetics that should not be there anymore. And because our womb is magnetic by nature, we we take on the other person's everything, right? If you're a woman, you've been having sex with a man, you've been soaking up his DNA, obviously, and his semen, and you have that internally. You have his pains, his wounds, his traumas, his all things good and bad, like it is good and bad, but you have all of this inside of your womb too. Like we carry those things in our womb to pass down to our children, right? Like the DNA. Like so it's really important that we clear them energetically, release them somatically, call our energy back. Like this is how, I go into like sacred sexuality quite a lot because a woman who is embodied in her womb and taking in her lover consciously has the ability to like magnetize and transmute. It is the way of the womb. And so when you're done, it's time to clear that out. It's time to make space. I am currently moving through a 28-day devotional with some women, and that's one of the things we did. We moved into an absolutely gorgeous, like devotional womb clearing where we were actually able to see what we're storing inside of our womb. And yeah, these men and the energetics that we carry within us afterwards. So it's really important to release them. Yoni de-armoring, especially if there was moments and times where there was sort of like sexual violations or boundaries crossing or anything, the way we open and soften is to go into it, release it. So yeah, that is what I wanted to talk to you about today. This was quite a massive deep dive into how we can move through heartbreak and heal. And I think what's really, really important and one of my key takeaways is do not judge yourself, criticize yourself, berate yourself, or shame yourself. When you're doing things that you normally wouldn't do to cope or to sort of numb or to whatever that is and whatever that looks like, do not shame yourself. Like we are all human, and these things will naturally fall away when you are regulated in your body and system. So I truly believe that when we move into spaces where we're clutching at external things that help soothe us and regulate us, things like, binge watching TV, binge drinking, any sort of like obsessive sort of compulsions, they actually are our way to try and regulate our system externally. And then as soon as we start coming back into the body, regulating ourselves, and become more in harmony with our body, these things actually naturally fall away because they are not incongruent with who we truly are. It's just us trying to get our needs met. So please, please, if you do one thing, do not go to war with yourself. You're already fighting a little battle inside of yourself about feeling all the things. Find support, find your people, and allow it to just be what it is without trying to have to's with your shoulds and have to's. As soon as you delve into the shoulds and have to's, what you have to do, what you should be doing, that is you moving through a paradigm that is actually not in alignment with the truth of your being for right now. So please don't try and escape what's happening. Be present moment to moment. And let me tell you that you can move through heartbreak so potently and so powerfully that you can use, and this is something that I do all the time, that you use this grief and this heartache and this pain as you can use it as fuel for something delicious and divine and magical. And this is what alchemy is. Like I started really using my grief and heartache and pain to start different projects. I went full into my business. I started a new podcast, a YouTube, and I was like, I can hurt and be in pain and stumble and crumble sometimes and spiral down, but I can still do this. I can still use that to make beautiful works of art. I can still use this as, a way to show up for myself lovingly. I can use this to tend to my body to come back home to myself and use this as a blessing, like a beautiful experience. Like I have learned so much from my past relationships. I have really, journaled and gotten deep into how I showed up, how I was in relationship, like what woundings I was carrying, the not so great ways I was relating, both toxic and unhealthy, and the fantastic ways that I was showing up. And, I use this all as like beautiful information, like curiousness. So the next time I move into opening my heart to another person, don't get me wrong, my boundaries are sky high, my expectations are big, and it's going to take a lot for somebody to really show me that they are in alignment with me. I'll feel it in my body, but I believe that who I am, the next version of myself, the the more embodied, the more powerful, the more softer, open, loving, delicious human I am that is willing to show up and have conversations can only be because of the softness that I've given myself through these crazy hard times for myself, right? I've used them as information. I've alchemized them within my being. I've already transmuted them, transformed them, and I am completely a whole new woman walking a whole new way. And, that is the reflection my girlfriend was saying to me. Like, I cannot believe how amazing you're doing. You're absolutely crushing it at the moment. You're showing up, you're doing this, you're on podcasts, you're on YouTube. And I had to say, yeah, and I'm still grieving and I'm still heartbroken. I'm still in the depth of that, but I will not let that be my story. I truly believe, as somebody who has done this 1,000 times before, that these are my biggest blessings. These are my biggest lessons. And I will not jump from one person to the other just to soothe these wounds. Like, I will take this as a deeply devotional, honoring, and reverence to myself, and move myself into like this in delicious, like self love, like into the depth of my body and heart, like self love, such self nurturing, like yumminess of who I am truly at my core, and let all of those old woundings that don't serve me fall away to the wayside, letting all of those woundings and pains just sort of crumble and dissolve with the presence of my heart, because that is what they want and need. And anything less than that is not juicy enough for me, my friends. It is not juicy enough. So this is what moving through heartbreak is like for me, and how it's been for me, and how I've been able to move through it quite fast, move on with my life, focus and redirect. And I'm here for it. I reckon I could do this 1,000 times over. Please, God, no, don't let me do this 1,000 times over. But yeah, I truly believe that heartache is a blessing, and it is a moment in time where we can actually reflect and look at ourselves and hold ourselves and love ourselves a little bit more. And if that isn't enough reason to keep your heart open and keep yourself soft, then I don't know what is. A lot of people have this misperception that a heart-led woman or a heart wide open woman is somebody that is going to be all light and love and fluff all the time, and not experience these things. And that is just not true with who we are as people, as humans. As a heart wider open and a heart-led woman, I will tell you that we crack the fuck open a lot, and it can be painful and it can be raw. And I would prefer to be obliterated open again and again, and allow myself to drop away the shields and the masks and the falsity again and again, so that I can be a deeper embodiment of who I'm truly meant to be any day. Any day. So that is how I have moved through my heartbreak pretty quickly. That's how I believe there's some tools and processes to help you move through your heartbreak and grief a little bit more quickly and help you process things. Let yourself go all the way there. Like, Let yourself do it. Like crack open, babies. I am here for it. I am here for a world of heart-led, soft, delicious, yummy women who are not closed off and hardened by their horrific experiences because that is what we need, embodied leaders and beings. Anyway, I will see you all next time on Alchemy with Sheeana Leigh. I hope you have a delicious fortnight, and I'll see you next fortnight for another deep dive. Bye.